Dan Murphy, ESPN, today with a very insightful and also informative story about the NCAA and also team schools, programs, universities on campus having more control of what can be done or said and what they can do. Dan, thank you for your time with Paul Craig, and I'm David Smoak. I know when people hear about the NCAA, they roll their eyes because Congress or whatever else. What is different about what we're hearing or what you're reporting today?
Hey, fellas, thanks for having me. Yeah, to be clear, this isn't a done deal yet. This is something that they're considering doing, and I think this is the NCAA members, the schools themselves, trying to start making a little progress, being proactive themselves, trying to change rules in a way that would open up the rules to allow schools just to make it much easier for the school to be involved in helping the athlete make money. They wouldn't be able to pay the athletes themselves yet, but it is walking up about as close to that line as they can get without actually making the athletes into employees themselves if all of this stuff actually goes through.
Well, wouldn't it just simplify it for the NCAA if you could, like, it's kind of ridiculous that, you can talk about NIL, you can talk about, that you need to get your donors involved in that, but then when it comes down to it, you can't say anything about it when it comes to specifics, which makes it seem all seedy and underground, which I know that some of it is, but it's legal now. So shouldn't they embrace the legality of it?
Right. And I think that's where more and more athletic directors are getting. I think when these rules first, it's funny, I was talking to the Nebraska athletic director about this morning, Trev Alberts, and he said the things we're talking about now, that we're trying to do now, are conversations we wouldn't even want to have started 2 years ago. And I think this was such a major change of what everybody was brought up with in college sports, and thinking, it's just verboten for us to be involved with anything in players and money, that it's taken 2 years and a few months for everyone to get a little bit more comfortable with it. And I think there's a lot of folks in positions of running athletic departments that have seen how this has worked for the past couple of years and just said, hey, can we just call this what it is at this point? And start treating it, like the small part of the business that it is. And that would make life a lot easier for a lot of the people who are actually trying to support athletes in the athletic departments, and trying to make sure that they get the best opportunities and don't get, the wool pulled over their eyes by a sketchy agent or something like that. And those are all things that could be potentially changing here in the next weeks or months.
Let's say that, okay, they have this out there. They want this. I saw and read your quote from Trev Alberts in Nebraska. What could derail this? And how do they prevent anyone from, saying, okay, wait a minute, most of this money, most of this time and energy will be for men's basketball and football. What about the girls?
So two different questions there. The second one, right, Title IX is always something that comes up. And actually bringing more of this under control of the athletic department might help with some of those problems. What you have to do with Title IX is make sure you create equal opportunities for all your men and women athletes on campus. And so if you have if you have a collective now who's doing much of that stuff, the collective, there's no way for an athletic director to control whether the collective offers the same kind of deals to a football player as they do to a volleyball player or a softball player. If that all falls under the school's purview more and more, if they offer the same resources and the same opportunities, it gets easier with Title IX to make that work. But in terms of your first question of what could get in the way here, I mean, there's still plenty to get in the way here. The NCAA has dragged its feet on everything, and really a lot of their paralysis over the past several years, over the past couple of decades, if you look at it, is the fear of being sued for anything they do as looking like it's an antitrust violation. And also they've gotten closer and closer to this line of the courts looking at the system of college sports and saying, you can call this whatever you want, but if you're helping an athlete put money in their pocket because they're an athlete at your school, that's employment. And that comes along with a lot of other tags that you have to then pay the athletes directly, and you have to treat them like employees. And that's really the hill that a lot of people in the NCAA are willing to die on. They're not there yet, but I think if there are enough people within the NCAA that look at this and say this is a step too close to employment, then they're going to back away from it, and that could potentially torpedo any chance of something like this happening.
How do you think this will help weed out some of the lesser collectives, so to speak?
Well, if the one of the changes that's been proposed here would be that the schools themselves could communicate with third-party licensees, which is a fancy NCAA way of saying that the athletic director or somebody in the athletic department could call up the collective that they want to use and say, hey, 8 guys on our defensive front need NIL deals. Can you hook them up? And, right now they're technically not supposed to do that. I think you'd be hard pressed to find an athletic department that doesn't have open lines of communications with their collectives at this point, but technically it's against the rules. If you give the athletic department a little bit more control about sort of lining up some of these deals for players, not quite negotiating the details of them, but, sort of walking the two parties into a room and saying, hey, you guys ought to figure this out together. Then the athletic department has a little bit more control over which collectives are sitting down with players and having those conversations.
Yeah, that seems like they basically are involved in the decision making, but they technically aren't.
It's semantics to a certain degree. It's leading a horse to water and basically taking the collective's hand and holding it out, and taking the athlete's hand and holding it out, and making them hold hands, but they got to shake themselves, I think is maybe the best way to describe it. It's getting as close to they can without actually having the legal responsibility of saying, the school is acting as an agent here, giving the athlete a deal.
Is this maybe the NCAA making a now, like they used to have you can have bagels but no cream cheese, because look, Alabama can afford cream cheese, but let's not get into what North Alabama can't. They can't have cream cheese; they just have butter there.
Yeah, I think there's some of this is more and more people within the NCAA and people that run college athletic departments recognizing that what they've done so far is not a sufficient amount of change, and that waiting for Congress to bail them out or hoping that they win a court case to bail them out is a very bad strategy, and that they have to try to take some proactive moves themselves. And so I don't know if this is the proactive move that solves all of their problems, but in the broader picture of sort of how are the people that run college sports looking at the situation they're currently in, I find this kind of announcement interesting, because you've got more and more athletic directors who are coming out saying, listen, at some point we're going to have to give more money to our athletes, and we should be giving more money to our athletes. And maybe this is the way to implement something like that without totally losing control over it.
Dan, great stuff, man. We appreciate it. It's a never ending, this along with realignment and Lord knows everything else. We appreciate your time, and thanks for jumping on during the busy day.
Thanks for having me.
Dan Murphy, ESPN on